Chapter 12. A few years back, Will had claimed the attic as an office, the place he went to compose his articles and correspondence. Now is mainly cardboard boxes full of nostalgic miscellanea that neither brother was able to discard. Jack flipped one loose lid, peered inside. More papers. There's more stuff here than I remember. Interesting. Beth forged a path farther into the confusion of plastic crates, garbage bags, and removal company boxes. How long have you been with Monarch? 4 years. I'm a little below mid-level. Tried out for their Chronon Operation program. You met a few of them at the university. I got through all the training, then tanked at the end. Jack frowned at this. You? On purpose. I wanted the training, but not to be locked down to a specialist unit. Better be underestimated and filed as generic. More room to move around without being noticed. There was a single cot and a small writing desk with a cheap 12-inch flat screen bolted to the wall above it. An old-style Bakelite phone with a coiled cord hung on the wall. Maybe Will had started spending nights there. Ever done anything you regret? No. I'm very good at not being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Jack thought about Aberfoyle's last moments. I believe in cause and effect. Which is why I'm not sweating Monarch's interest in you yet. Beth stepped around the rotting carcass of the recliner stacked with bundled printouts. Does anything look out of place to you? Jack ran his eyes over the ordered stacks of boxes. Slothing heaps of clothes filled garbage bags. Mr. Squishy. Pardon? Jack waded sideways past knee-high stacks of Scientific American to fetch a fading toy elephant from the top of the corner stack of boxes. Dad won him on a country fair when I was like 6. I carried around with the house for years. Will used to say, Squish knows all Jack's secrets. Beth blinked, made her way back, and started wrapping the boxes top to bottom. Tap, 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 tap. Nothing special. She booted the bottom one of her foot and had to give it a concrete block. That one. Together they tossed up the top 3 boxes aside and tore open the lid of the 4th. Slided neatly inside was what they could only be the flat, hard, gunmetal gray top of a safe. Beth tore the box open away. Short, even-sided manual combination lock. B-rated. Less than $300 from Home Depot. Give me a drill and I think I could crack this. Seriously? YouTube. We kept a lot of that stuff in the barn. Sit tight, I'll grab it. Beth waved him off. She removed a bulky, palm-sized device from her pocket. Checked the power on it. I got it. Look around, see what else you could find. Jack gestured to the hunk of black technology in her hand. What's that? Business. Be right back. And just like that, Jack found himself alone and outflanked by battalions of forgotten details in allegiance to a history he tried to forget. The muscles in Martin Hatch's jaw were flexing. I must insist, he said once more. Let me give the order. It can be done quickly and quietly. Paul extended a leather-gloved hand. A waiting operative handed him his handgun and rig. I saw many futures for William Joyce. Most of them featured him doing harm to our cause. He had to die. The path we're now on does not feature Jack being an immediate concern. There's time. Martin wasn't having it. We both know that a motivated individual conditionally exempt from laws of causality possesses enormous potential for harm to this company. On a timeline of any length, 1 word from you and that variable is forever removed. Paul pulled on the remaining glove, concealing the light of his flesh, and flexed his strange, aching hand. Martin pressed his point. Eliminating Joyce is an act of conscious diligence, not only to our shareholders, but to our species. We are 10 minutes from midnight, Paul Serene. Paul slung the shoulder rig, zipped his light woolen sweater, and shrugged into the calfskin diving coat. No, we've attempted time and again replicate my condition. Time and again, failure. Dr. Kim, that poor old howling bastard, represents what we have condemned each one of our test subjects to becoming. Yet here's Jack, intact, sound of mind and body, manipulating time as freely as I do. We cannot simply have him killed, Martin. An operative pulled the van's door aside, letting in brisk morning air. Not before better options have been expended. Inside the front door of the house, Beth took a breath, focused, and moved briskly out and down the steps at a tripping gait, eyes scanning the tree line. The barn was unlocked. Once inside, she double-checked the device in her hand. It was a 2-inch diameter polyurethane ball attached to a cell phone-sized brick of tech with a 1-inch monochrome display. She powered it up, cycled down the 5-option menu to display, and then the screen flicked over to the white-on-black central dot. A single white clock hand swung 360 degrees around the dot and vanished. The unit seemed calibrated. She checked her watch, then scooted up the ladder to the hayloft. The hayloft doors that faced the house and the tree line beyond were closed. Sure enough, the wall on the other side of the hayloft doors held a few shelves, the shelves containing tools. Beth ignored all of them and went for the hunting rifle. Cross-legged in the dust, Jack stared at the safe. Then he looked at the towering stacks of his past. Then he looked at the stuffed elephant in his hand. "You wanted me to find this," he said. "What combination would you have used? What combination would you have thought I'd know to use?" The elephant had no answers. Jack checked his watch. He'd been here for 2 hours. He had to go. Then halfway to rising, he chose to sit back down. Maybe the past had something to say. "If you want to show me, show me." Nothing. Just dusty light and the smell of rat bait and mothballs. Then, just as he was about to leave, the light changed. The sun through the window sank below the eastern horizon, the attic interior cycling to light to dark over and over, faster and faster, and then a man came into the attic, closing the hatch behind him. Jack heard something being placed on the writing desk. The sound of 2 latches popping, papers, 2 latches clicking shut. A body pushed its way toward the safe, and then Will was crouching beside Jack, peering at the tumbler, rubber-banded files in his hand. "5 left," he whispered. 27 right. 90 left, Jack finished for him. "My birth date." The safe cranked open, and Will vanished. Beth had a roll of black plastic tape in the pocket of her fatigues. Laying the rifle on the board, she placed the ball and box device as flush as possible against the rifle's frame, the device's LED screen facing toward the stock, the ball towards the barrel, and started looping the tape around the body. It held okay, but the thing really needed a custom mount or a Picatinny rail. This was just messy. Beth placed a can of nails on the old camp chair, moved it to just in front of the hayloft doors, and rested the rifle on it with the ball sensor facing toward the closed wooden doors. She checked her watch and waited. The file inside the safe was thin, unimpressive. It contained paperwork. Property H.G. Wells owning a swimming hall. Inside the folder was taped a single key. That wasn't what got Jack's attention. Jack put the property folder back in the safe and examined a 2-page document with the alarming heading of Panic Buttons. Jack scanned it quickly. Locations: attic, kitchen, Jack's bedroom. Maintenance: check the seals on the jugs at least once every 6 months. They need to be airtight. If the seals degrade, the ether will dissipate. Attic goes first. Second floor goes 60 seconds later. If second floor fails, expect the attic to collapse into second floor after about 20 minutes. Sensitive materials to be packed close to the jugs in the attic and Jack's room to ensure vaporization. Jack sat with that for a while. Then he looked at the 4 corners of the attic. Crap and junk were piled into all the corners. He picked up Squish, got to his feet, and investigated the farthest corner, the one stacked with document boxes. He pulled them aside, made his way through a couple of layers, and was rewarded with the sight of something that made him take a step back. Hiding beneath it all was a glass jug, just a gallon, sitting flush against the wall with what looked like a pipe bomb lashed to it with fraying old duct tape. The gallon was full to the brim with clear liquid and stoppered with caulk. The thick green wire led from the bomb and down through the cracks of the dusty floorboards. On the wooden shelf above, the device was a folder. On the cover was a hand-drawn rendering of the 12-sided sphere Jack had seen in his bedroom. Jack's phone bleeped, causing him to flinch violently. "Fuck me!" The name on the screen was Nick, cab. He rested Squish on the topmost box and was about to take the call when something within him pulsed. The feeling was new yet familiar. He'd felt it hours prior, before the first stutter had hit. "Nick?"
"Jack, dude, are you still at the house?"
Jack looked at the corner behind him. Glass glinted at him from between a couple of apple crates. There had been one hidden in each corner. Will had wired the attic to become a fireball. Why?
TV, turn it on.
Christ. How did Will set this up without killing himself? The guy couldn't make cereal without setting fire to the curtains. Jack navigated out of the mess, back to the desk, and turned to the crappy little flat screen. Weather channel. What am I looking for?
Channel 12.
Jack flipped through. Kitchen appliances, who's the boss, sharks, Nazis, his face. What the fuck?
Yeah, you mind explaining that?
Jack reached for the volume. Shut up for a second! It was his face, but the voice he heard was deep, soothing, masculine. Reliably informed as Jack Joyce, the brother of specialist of Monarch Innovations fired some time ago. Monarch Security is working with the Riverport Police Department to determine if that is a relevant detail. We have multiple survivor reports which indicate that Joyce's stated intent was to detonate the library with the protesters inside. It would be irresponsible to speculate with motive at this stage, but it's clear that he is associated with the so-called peace movement. Cut to a live broadcast on campus. The reporter was pretty, Asian American. Her interview subject was African American, dark-skinned, bald, and a solid 15 inches taller. The owner of that deep, soothing voice. It was the lazy gaze and the unhurried speech. The way Hatch didn't look at the reporter but straight at the camera, no blinking. Standing thin inside that 5-figure suit, Martin Hatch radiated the threat potential of an apex predator. The effect was smooth and deep and hypnotic, and made Jack dislike him immediately. Jack Joyce is a career itinerant with a preference for world hotspots. Afghanistan, Syria, Thailand. He has the interest of RPD, FBI, NSA, DHS, and Monarch Security. If you see this man, do not approach. Call 911 immediately. Thank you. The report cut to a live feed from the side of the library smoking ruins. Early morning sunlight flashed off wet black timber. Arcs from the fire hoses cast rainbows. Jack's throat closed. His brother's remains were somewhere under that. The reporter's expression was stern, standard issue. Her features pleasant. His gut kicked again. Jack Joyce, who had numerous prior run-ins with the law, is suspected of attempted murder and the premature demolition of Riverport University Library. He's a... The moment dragged out for what felt like seconds. The image on the screen crawling, interlacing. Nausea rose in his gut as the seconds stretched and divided, stretched and then snapped back into shape. William Joyce, who had directed threats at university staff after being fired, died in the library explosion. The Riverport Police Department urgently requests that any information regarding Jack Joyce's whereabouts be directed to them immediately. A stutter was coming, and soon. Nick cleared his throat.
Monarch's outside my house, Jack. Do I go in?
I wouldn't.
What about my dad?
I'm sorry, I don't know. The volume on the phone dipped and spiked.
Hang on. Someone's calling. Shit. I think they're calling from my dad's phone.
Don't answer.
They've got my dad.
They can't threaten you if you don't answer. Jack's phone trilled in his ear. Fuck. Unknown number.
They calling you now?
Nick, I take it back. Go in. Tell them I abducted you. Do what's best for yourself and your dad. Whatever happens, I don't blame you for it. Jack ended both calls, then flinched as a nearby bell complained. Heavy, shrill, and loud. The 35-year-old Bakelite phone on the wall was vibrating. Jack's nostrils flared. He made a decision to pick up. Angry. Call my cell! And then hung up. His cell phone rang. So what do we do?
Jack.
Paul. 1,000 words couldn't release everything that he fought to get out. So Jack lowballed it. Explain. Walking to the window, he could see the barn, but no sign of Beth.
I'm sorry about Will.
Fury came out matter-of-fact chipper. You will be. Paul didn't acknowledge the threat.
I thought a long time about Will. I didn't want that, but he forced my hand, Jack.
Hey, no worries, Paul. We're still solid, yeah? Jack experienced an anger so profound it messed with his vision. His phone's casing surrendered a meek little pop.
What I did will haunt me until I die.
So, less than a day then.
Listen to me.
Paul's breathing was suddenly spasmodic, tremulous.
I'm trying to help you.
You know, I'm lousy on phones, Jack said, all charm. What say we talk this over face to face? Paul sighed.
Sure,
He said.
come downstairs. I'm in the kitchen.
Gibson had gone from his meeting with Hatch straight to the squad room. When he'd walked in, he knew straight away that everyone knew. Donnie had been a man about it. Walked straight up and let Gibson crack him in the face. No worries, boss, the kid had said, checking his nose, wiping away blood with a thumb. It was a bullshit decision. None of us here buy it. Irene nodded. They all did. Gibson said to Donnie, What's our orders? Sit tight, cool down. Nah, that ain't right. They'd be going after Joyce. They need us. Donnie shook his head. Hatch said technicians and strikers. After last night, he wants us taking half a day. To decompress, Molly said. They want us fresh and running security the gala tonight, Voss put in. Technicians and strikers. Chronon active standard troops and bulked up show ponies using first-gen Chronon tech in an attempt to mimic a couple of Serene's powers. All of them more in love with their gear than their creed. Donnie, get me a spot on one of them technician units on Joyce's farm detail. And that's how Gibson wound up in the woods surrounding the Joyce place. It was a nice morning. Clear, fresh. His daughter Lorelei would have appreciated it. Maybe he'd buy the place when this is all over. He could pick out one of those big trees over there, build the kid a house. Sit on the porch and watch Tomiko push Lorelei on a tire swing. Listen to the kids' laughter carry across the garden. He was lying on his belly, draped in ghillie netting, next to one of the ding-dongs from Talon Squad, and about half a mile from Joyce's spread. He tapped the side of the long-nosed sniper rifle the guy was resting his face on. That one now ours? The sniper lifted one leafy paw, tapped the monarch stamp of the rifle's breech. That was a poor discipline right there. An operative worth the name would have grunted in affirmative and kept his eyes screwed to the scope. Linux-based targeting system. Weather conditions, wind speed, target speed. Got Netflix on there? The Wookiee snorted. Might as well. Once the scope tags the target, it can put a round-up-his-ass moving June bug at 1,800 yards while jerking off. Sounds like you're one innovation away from unemployment. The goon coughed up a less convincing chuckle. Fuck, Gibson was bored. He got into the detail because he knew Mr. Hatch wanted that Joyce kid dead, and Serene didn't. If Randall could hand Mr. Hatch that little fuck's head and plausible deniability, then the boss gets what he wants, minus any fallout. Gibson would just say he was defending himself. Fuck, he was bored. He'd been there on his dick in the dirt for the last hour and nothing was happening. Ever had to shit yourself on the job? No response. Is that still part of the training? Shitting in a bag? Lying in a ditch for 4 days, getting a target? I mean, if you gotta go, you gotta go, right? The shooter mumbled something about it being a small price to pay for freedom. What an asshole. He was probably wearing one now. Fuck, he was bored. Then, target spotted. Barn. Upper floor. Female. Gibson wrestled the binoculars to his face. The hayloft doors had been opened. Some broad in a baseball cap. Fatigues. Looking good in a t-shirt but couldn't make out her face. Well, hello there, pumpkin butter. Cap pulled low, head always dipped. One hell of a hard body, though. Name's Randall, and you are? And the stud beside the trigger clicked. Target locked. Then, lost visual. Target stepped away from the window. A voice, deep and comforting, murmured over comms.
High ground 1.
It was Hatch. Gibson kept his mouth shut.
Please describe the target.
Caucasian female, mid-20s, 5'10", baseball cap, appears unarmed, the sniper mumbled.
Our consultant hasn't emerged.
All units report no exits as yet, sir. Silence on the line. Then...
You have the green light. Proceed.
Jack came down the stairs, gun in hand. Someone coughed in the kitchen, took a reassuring breath. Jack stepped off the stairs, moved left toward the kitchen, the interior coming into view. Far wall, framed pictures, fridge, bench, and cabinets. Someone that looked like Paul. Hi, Paul said. Paul didn't appear to be offended at having a gun pointed at his face. That familiar but different face.
Except for last night, it's been almost 20 years since I've seen you, Jack. And here I am with no idea of what to say.
Paul smiled, and Jack wanted to do something he wasn't sure he'd regret.
Seeing you here, the young man I remember, in this house, it's eerie.
Paul jerked his thumb toward the drying rack.
Well kept every Ziploc bag you used for lunches. Every dinner, every Friday night, we'd wash and hang them on the rack there. He made a box of those bags last for years.
Will's dead. You killed him.
Jack.
Jack cocked the automatic's hammer uselessly. Shut up and start talking.
The person you grew up with is gone, Jack. It's for the best. But I still remember. That counts for something.
Paul pulled the silver chain around his neck, drew out what it secured. His silver bullet.
I remember it all.
The sight of the bullet made Jack think of the gun in his hand. The gun in his hand made him think of Paul holding a gun on Will. Thinking of Will dispelled pity. I don't think you do.
Will was right. Something was wrong with the machine's calibration. Time will end. I've seen it. In fact, time will end because I've seen it. The waveform of that particular potential future has now collapsed and now become an unavoidable certainty. Except,
Jack had to believe there was an answer here.
The time machine. I go back. I find us. I tell us not to use the machine. This never happens. Will never dies. And I spend the rest of my life trying to forget how badly I wanted to shoot you.
Paul shook his head sadly.
Has that happened?
When I do go back, it will have happened. And then I guess we won't ever remember having this conversation.
So if the events of the present we currently inhabit never occurred, what would motivate you to go back in time and warn us?
Hearing that was like watching Will die all over again. Jack shook his head.
There's a way. You can't change the past. I'm sorry.
Hate pulled Jack forward.
You're lying. If changing the past were possible, I would locate Will's prototype. The first machine, older than Monarch's, the one we built in the barn out there, and do my damnedest to make that work. Then I would use it to travel back and prevent the Monarch machine being made. That would prevent the fracture from occurring and spare me a terrible life. But it is not possible.
Jack's mind wheeled.
There was no answer to this. Do you know where Will's machine is, Jack?
If this is true, then why do any of this? Why kill my brother? Why kill all the people at the university? Paul weighed his words carefully.
There are reasons why last night was necessary. First, we took the core from the lab and installed it into a secondary promenade within Monarch Tower. We made it known that this was done as a safety precaution by Monarch personnel. Now the world knows a sensitive Monarch project was targeted by a terrorist group. Second, I need the mood of the nation to be primed. The public and the administration want a simple target for their anger. Soon I'll provide that target in a manner that is advantageous to the objectives of the company. For that to work, the events at the university had to be mediapathic, showy.
There was a time Jack remembered when Paul couldn't bring himself to use a mousetrap. Paul looked Jack in the eye earnestly, no guile.
Monarch doesn't exist to change the future. It exists to help us survive it. We have a plan, he said. We call it Lifeboat. If you hand me a brochure, Paul, I swear to God. We can't stop the fracture, Jack. We can't stop the arrival of the end of time. That waveform has collapsed, but Lifeboat will does assure, that our best and brightest remain able to repair and recede the flow of causality after the Myers-Joyce field collapses and time ends.
It took a second for Jack to fully understand that his rage was becoming dilute with horror. Horror at the realization that he understood Paul's decisions, and maybe sympathized with him.
And Will? Will was unique. A pioneer. He was given every opportunity to play a key role in the success of Lifeboat. But you know Will. No one could do his thinking for him. The knowledge and expertise that he had, and the powerful desire to use it against us, made him a very real threat to the future of humanity. I love Will like a brother, Jack. You know that. It became harder to keep the gun straight, vision threatening to blur. Paul took one step toward him and said as gently as he could, "You are faced with the same choice." Standing as far from the open hayloft doors as she could, Beth went through her breathing exercises, focused on what she was about to do. She shook the tension out of her hands, checked her watch again, and then she fished for the notes in her fatigues. They were a crumple of crumpled pages torn from the moleskin written in blue ink, meticulous and neat for maximum legibility. No fuck-ups permitted. She knew them back to front, but checked the times again anyway. Ran through her checklist, checked her watch, closed her eyes, and breathed. 57 seconds. Inside the house, Paul Serene said, 6 years ago I was exposed to a near-lethal burst of chronon radiation. I became ill, and my relationship with time changed even further. I can, with effort, stand at the junction between myriad possible futures, and choose which one to take. The flesh of his arm ached, phased minutely from one state to another. Paul shuddered discreetly. Do you want to tell me how this scene ends? I use the ability sparingly, Jack. It costs me. I use it to save nations, not win the lottery. I'm here now because I trust you not to kill me, to hear me out. I don't trust me not to do that. Paul persevered. This selective foreknowledge I have has allowed me to subtly exert a profound influence over government at local, state, and national levels, and consequently, the world. Oncoming history is a slalom, Jack. The extinctions and conflagrations that I have navigated our idiot species past. My God, the atrocities I have tried to facilitate in order to avoid a greater catastrophe down the road. Paul couldn't look Jack in the eye as he said it, his left hand flexing uncomfortably. He cleared his head, got back to business. Discreet teams of lobbyists, the manipulation of favor economies, deniable personnel, and the leveraging of specialities of divisions within Monarch all form a scalpel that can cut into the deep tissue, remove, remodel, and leave no scar. It has been the work of 16 years to reach this point. And? We call it Project Lifeboat. Monarch has been exploiting Will's innovations and Dr. Kim's advancements to allow ordinary people to operate freely in a chronon-devoid environment. The end of time itself. So you can have a dozen people wandering around a frozen world waiting to die? That's a shitty use of 16 years, Paul. A few hundred people, actually. All at the top of their field. All carefully selected. Paul sighed. If we have mobility, then we have a chance to restart causality, and our only chance. Paul straightened. Come with me. Come to Monarch Tower. You need to see what we've been building. Jack shook his head. I need to think. Call off your goons. With respect, Jack. Thinking's not my strong suit. Yeah, I get it. Do it, Paul, or next time you see me, I'll be waving you as a Monarch Tower falls into Mystic River. Alright. Please don't make me regret this. Paul touched a finger to his ear. Monarch Actual, this is your consultant. 10 seconds. Everything works, Beth told herself. 5 seconds. 4. 1 breath in for the road. 2, and out. Go. 2 steps. Turn. Face the woods and... Beth jerked her head left as the .338 slug trilled past a blow, a fresh wood crater in the aging timber of the barn's back wall. She translated the movement into a full body turn, swept up the hunting rifle, and let the shot spotter tell her exactly where that bullet had come from. A gunshot rang out across the front garden. Disbelief. You bastard. Monarch Actual. Paul warped across the room, away from Jack's gun. Monarch Actual! Then zipped from the kitchen and up the stairs. Jack warped after him, overdid it, slammed into the back of the sofa and flipped over it. Paul was shouting from the bedroom upstairs, which was when Jack realized he'd left the attic ladder down. Gibson was over it. You fucking missed? This was bullshit. Up at Sparrowfart to lie in the dirt with some over-equipped self-shitting paramilitary neckbeard only to have him completely fuck up the one thing he was here for? There was a short zip and the shooter's head snapped back. He slumped, lifeless, over his expensive rifle. Gibson shouted, "Yes!" tossed off his netting, grabbed his rifle and threw himself down the slope toward the farm. Maybe the morning wasn't a dead loss after all. From outside, a second gunshot from the barn. Beth was still alive and armed, evidently. Zipping and angling up the stairs, Jack stopped short of the bedroom door, then swung in with weapon raised. No Paul. Fuck! He could feel his capacity for folding into the moment diminishing like a kind of soul breathlessness. He moved into the hall, took a moment, and summoned enough energy to flash up the ladder to the attic. He found Paul in the middle of Will's life, waiting. A slapping sting in Jack's gun hand, and suddenly the gun was Paul's. Let's talk about this. Jack behind cover. Beth unzipped her jacket and checked the charge of her rescue rig. A lightweight belt and braces-style harness made of segmented plates attached to a power source distributed about her waist. A quick click revealed the chronon pack on the back, and the belt was full charge. Slipping out of the jacket, she took a mesh drawstring pouch from her leg pocket, unrolled it, and drew out a neatly tied roll of wires. 2 sets. One end had a rudimentary series of plugs, and the other a series of 5 cups. For 4 fingertips, one for the thumb. Slipping the cups over her digits, Beth Velcro strapped the thin cord to her forearm and bicep, and then slotted the 5 plugs into 5 jacks on the shoulder harness. She repeated for her other arm. The rescue rig was good to go. You could have searched this place any time you liked. Why now? We did. There was nothing here at the time but this. Paul glanced about. Much of this is new. He opened the nearest box, dug deep, pulling aside papers and folders. Have you seen any diagrams or schematics of a device like a 12-sided sphere? I need you to think. This is very important. Jack let himself rest against the desk. Sure, he said. Yeah, in the corner over there. Where? Far corner, near the stuffed elephant. Jack had loved that house. It wasn't much without a family in it, though. You know, Paul, Jack said, you dropped a building on my brother. Reaching behind a flat screen, he found the panic button. A palm-sized metal box with a plastic idiot shield covering a fat, red detonator. He flipped it up. Paul shifted sideways, peered deep into the stacks of magazines and papers. Saw a gallon jug. Knew immediately what it was. Reacted accordingly. Seems fair that I return the favor. The detonator went click. There were 2 hearts in that attic. Both stopped for an instant. From behind a stack of plastic storage tubs, something popped, then hissed. Concealed wiring along the ceiling joined blackened and fritzed. That was it. Jack rolled back his head, exasperated. For Christ's sake, Will! Paul went for his sidearm. Jack reacted. Then the attic exploded. Gibson vaulted the fence in time to see the attic window spit glass, unrolling a tongue of thick flame across the yard. Then the stutter hit, and the whole of the Lord's creation stopped. Sounds Randall Gibson hadn't even noticed. The rasp of leaves in the morning breeze, the distant hush of traffic, the trill of a lonely bird trying to get laid, all drew out, alien and discordant. Beneath a boom turned to a roar, turned to a whine, turned to a knot, but the tinnitus pinging in his ears. That rolling column of glass speckled flame hung absurdly like a mistake across a bright blue sky. The chronon gauge on his rescue rig read a full charge. All good. Designed by the Merlins at Monarch, the rig was a brace across his waist and shoulders, and fit neatly beneath the jacket. It afforded him a discreet profile, better than the roidy, NASA-looking crap the Strikers wore. Downside, the charge sucked. If Paul Serene was still alive in there, he'd be mobile, moving, unassisted through a stutter was just one of the things that cold-eyed freak could do. Nah, the consultant would be fine. Best check on that little hard body in the barn. A godclap vanished Jack's past beneath all-consuming tidal wave of flame. It lunged from all corners, the attic filled and gone in a roaring instant. From within his bubble of suspended time, Jack watched as all that was left of his former life died in less time than it took to blink. The flames hesitated, paused, backtracked, resumed. Within the thermosphere of frozen time, even the dust on the boards beneath his feet remained undisturbed, as was the section of wall caught in the bubble. All else? Hades. On the far side of the immobile wall of flames, something shimmered through the suspended smoke and haze. A man-sized dome of suspended time. Within it, shaken and furious, Paul Serene stood up. Gibson slipped into the barn, strolled to the ladder, and climbed on up. What a dump. Cans, shelves, crap. All of it older than he was. There she was, back pressed to the rusty shelf by the hayloft doors, rifle in hand, still as a statue. Hey there, you waiting for me? He liked the way her t-shirt hugged her, beneath the canvas jacket that was spoiling the view. Her head was down, focused on the rifle, red hair tied back in a ponytail. He ducked his head, angling for a peek of her face beneath that cap. He noted the shot spotter taped to her weapon. An unusual piece of equipment. That told Gibson she knew what she was getting into, but taped to a cheap old deer rifle? Couldn't be civilian, the way she zeroed in on the Guardian squad shooter. So who was this warm little slice of pie? Above book? Ew, this dude's gross. Examining the rifleman, Gibson noticed her hands, specifically her fingers, which were capped with rubberized thimbles, like the ones he wore attached to his rescue rig. The hardbody glanced at him from beneath the rim of her cap. She put her shoulder into a swing straight at the bridge of his nose, but Gibson was ready, shifting his weight and angling away. That put a big old smile on his face. She spun with the wasted momentum, and he leaped on her for the split second her back was to him. He grabbed the rifle and yanked it like a crossbar for her throat. She surprised him. She let go immediately and dropped, weight displaced. Gibson lurched backward, rebounding off a rack of flimsy yet unmoving iron shells. Turned out she had a pistol. That figured. Holy shit. It was Washout Wilder. "Drop the rifle," she said. "You have got to be fucking kidding me. Drop it!" "You have fucked up your life masterfully, Wilder. I stand before you in awe." He tossed it away. 10 feet out of the rifle lost whatever chronon charge it had picked up from either of them, froze suspended in midair. "Spare me. I know all about you, Gibson." "Want me to sign your tits?" "I want you to deactivate your rig." "Yeah, and I want you to..." She cut him off with barely tolerant, "Don't!" and a very slow shake of the head. Gibson racked up a checklist of things to work through once he got that gun off her. "Deactivate it," she said. "Why, you want a clock?" "You have a kid." "So? You just shot Larry. His sister's got diabetes. Lorelai doesn't have to grow up without her dad. 3. Or what? You'll murder me?" "Killed Larry. 2. Okay. He took that moment to catalog her. Height, weight, complexion, hair, eyes, build, accent, distinctive features. "You should have shot me." Gibson slapped release plates on both hips. The power supply disconnected. Gibson froze. She lowered her weapon, hand shaking. Gibson was frozen, no longer a threat. Rig deactivated. Even immobile, locked into that self-dividing moment, his expression told her this wasn't over. This was a mistake. Once the stutter broke, Gibson would radio in and blow her cover. Or kill her. Or worse, if he could. She should kill him. He wouldn't be the first or the last, but killing him meant killing the love and joy she had seen in Lorelai's eyes. Beth knew it meant condemning that little girl to becoming someone too much like herself. Wounded and robbed. Full of questions that would never be answered. You shouldn't have done that, Paul said. The stutter rolled forward, slowly, excruciatingly seething. It was worth a shot. Paul looked at the stolen gun in his hand, like he had never seen it before. Then he checked the mag. We recover quite quickly, don't we? From injuries, our relationship to the chronon field constitutes a kind of secondary immune system, one that keeps us alive, protected not from infection but misadventure. But it still allows us to feel the pain of our mistakes, permits them to scar us. I myself have many scars. The bullet impacted against Jack's stutter shield before he registered that Paul had raised the gun. Some injuries our privilege cannot save us from. The bullet hovered, impatient, 2 feet away from Jack's head. Do not confuse your new state of being with being invulnerable, Jack. You are anything but. Jack's shield quivered and expired. He jagged left, and bullet snapping past his ear to spark off the time-locked wall behind him. Oxygen vanished, shockingly chewed up to feed the slow-motion flames. Mouth working uselessly. Jack felt his chest tighten, fast and painfully. The stutter lost its grip. Heat kicked off. Jack's chest burned from the inside, and then downstairs the secondary charges blew. Jack's ankles bit as the floorboard punched upward. He was airborne, and then causality quit. The stutter kicked back in, guillotining the roar to silence. He and Paul crashed back to earth on floorboards halted in the moment of splintering and heaving upwards, gouts of flame spilling up through gaps in wood right across the attic. Jack's hand came down through on such gap, hand and forearm disappearing into flame. With a yelp, he snatched it back just before the stutter rewound and splintered jaws on the floor snapped shut, resealing. He toppled, and then the boards re-erupted a second time, knocking him sideways. With a yell, he rolled with it, batting the sides of his face with his hair briefly caught fire. Time lost track of itself again, slowed abruptly, then froze. Paul didn't hesitate. He warped across the room and out of the attic, down into whatever was left of the second floor. Gulping uselessly, vision dimming, Jack folded into a moment. Floor and attic in flames, slipping past him in an instant. His hip connected with the desk, spinning him past the flaming ruin of the trapdoor and almost flipping him through the blown-out window. He spied movement at the gate to the property, out by the road. Impossibly, Monarch troops were moving through the stutter, into the property where they divided into large groups, one continuing down the drive, the second breaking off to loop around the rear side of the barn. No sign of Beth anywhere. The floor and walls pounded, expanding and retracting, rupturing and resealing. His home had become a superheated heart in the grip of complete arrhythmia. Paul flashed to the trapdoor and leaped down, transferring his weight and movement into a roll that was intended to propel him down the hall and toward the staircase. He hit the boards hard, ducked, tucked his shoulder, and came up running just as the door to Jack's bedroom blew off its hinges on a superheated cloud. With a yell, he transferred the run into a slide, getting under the twirling blade of the door, but too late to avoid singed skin and hair. Just before the explosion had second thoughts and took it all back. Pause. Paul scrambled to his feet, batting at his clothes. Nothing was burning. Whether it was luck or nostalgia, either way, Paul spent a second glancing into a room he hasn't visited since he was a child. Through the open door, on a desk, waiting for him, was the answer to an obsession. A small wire-framed replica of a 12-sided geodesic. This was a shape, a design, that had resided inside Paul's brain for the last 6 years. This was the shape of the thing he had tasked the greatest scientific brains with unraveling, understanding, replicating, implementing. This was the shape of the thing that rested at the heart of the Monarch Tower, the thing upon which all of their discoveries had been based, yet was so poorly understood. A masterpiece of arcane design created by the genius Paul had to kill. The regulator. A 3D model perched atop a stack of yellowing documentation. He lunged forward, channeling his chronon flow to influence the door, allowing him to release it from a stutter, shoving it open. Paul flung his hands forward to protect the model, clutching play. The bomb in the wall behind the desk redetonated, catching Paul in the face just before the shield erected, the shockwave slamming him into and through the frail door. Yellowed papers flew like burning birds as he crashed into the opposite wall, face in agony, his clothes aflame.
Shrieking and screaming, he flipped over and rolled to suffocate the flames, narrowly avoiding being killed as the safe in the attic above fell through the weakened ceiling and cannoned through the floor 2 feet from his thrashing head. And pause. Time struggled against that constraint, tumbling forward slowly as hesitant causality continued to tear the place apart. With agonizing fussiness, erupting boards, wallpaper blackening, and the curling and flaming. Framed photographs tumbled as the cords that held them incinerated, the glass snapping and crazing with thermal shock as the image they contained turned dark and died. Scrambling upright, he wheeled toward the bedroom, the smashed door suspended in midair, the interior an inferno. Everything in the room was lost. The regulator model was destroyed, but Paul held something that gave him hope. Scorched and torn papers were bunched into his balled fist, remnants of Will's design for the regulator, charred and half destroyed. But it was something. The stutter would collapse any moment. Half blind and agonized, Paul Serene propelled down the stairs, through the kitchen and out the back door. In the attic, Jack spun away from the window as the far side of the roof collapsed in a thick rain of burning beams, shingles, and insulation. Ceiling had parted from the wall. Kindling shrapnel sprang wide across the property. A blown-back flap of roofing allowed the sky to peer through the ceiling's ribcage. Directly ahead of him, the floor bottomed out completely as the weight of the safe killed the boards, sending it plummeting down to the hallway below, punching through the floor and shattering the downward runnel through the kitchen cabinets. A searing plume of flame jetted upward through the trapdoor, then froze. Somewhere below, Paul screamed in pain. The conflagration paused and juddered, partially rewound, then leaped forward, repeat, as though undecided about what should happen next. The scene abruptly leaped into a rapidly escalating shudder. Things could burst back into real time at any moment. Against his better judgment, Jack let his feet propel him toward the massive hole in the floor. Against his better judgment, Jack let his feet propel him toward the massive hole in the floor. The lips of the wound vibrated steadily upward, closing before trembling downward again. The cycle accelerated up and down, flame and sparks and debris jetting in and out, jabbing at eyes and skin. Forearms across his face, the floor trembling and snapping. Jack slipped, skidded, and tumbled through with a yell. Pause. He tumbled through a cloud of time-locked debris. Shreds of unmoving ash, wallpaper, shrapnel slashed at his hands and clothes as he plummeted downward, hit the second-floor hallway, and tumbled backward through the wound in the floor, which the falling safe had left behind. Shoulder blades clipped shattered kitchen cabinets as he tumbled feet first into the debris-laden kitchen floor, where the safe lay face down in the wreckage. The kitchen ceiling was a crumbling mess, wreathed in rolls of static fire, curtains blackened and blazing, framed in a snapshot in the front garden of an otherwise perfect autumn morning. Groaning, he rolled to his hands and knees, scanning for any way out. The back door out of the kitchen had collapsed. In the opposite direction, flaming debris was filling the living area as it rained from the conflagration in the attic. Vacillating between falling and rising, curling one way or another. It was a raising and lowering curtain of death. He ran for it, palming away skipping shards and cinders, diving under a crossbeam that rose and fell like an axe blade. Jack sped through the living area, shielding his face. Leaping across the flaming dining room table, he tripped on the back of a time-locked chair, hit the ground, rolled with it, and shoulder aching from impact, belted through a screen door on the far side of the house and into the greenhouse. Dull heat gave way to muted cold. Jack skidded to a stop, hip banging hard into a rusted planter rack. Aching all over, he took a second to assess the next course of action. Once this place had been full of life. His mother had made it a verdant womb, a place that had once brought her happiness. Jack had loved it in winter, and when the world was ankle-deep in frost, and this sweating glass house had been close and warm and alive. Orchids had been her passion. Jack Joyce, 28 years old now, sprinted through the fragile mausoleum to his dead mother, feet pounding across the mold-encrusted concrete, past racks and beds gone to rust and ruin, and shoved wide the frail, grime-darkened glass door to stumble, gasping into morning sunlight. The black eyes of a dozen assault rifles awaited him. Without pausing, he translated himself into speed and flew toward the technician squad, unloading, missing by a wide margin, bullets sparking off the time-locked greenhouse. The The delicate bones in his hand cracked as his fist met the face of the first trooper, square below his nose, spun and booted his compatriot in the back of his knee. He didn't bother with the assault rifle which was strapped to the man, but went for the sidearm while the rest of the team oriented and reacted. The first trooper punched the gravel, back first. Jack snatched the weapon and warped back toward the momentarily bulletproof greenhouse as the squad opened up. The second trooper hit the dirt, covering his head. Jack popped back to regular speed behind a row of molding planters, stacked flush against the greenhouse wall, the bones in his hand already mending. He popped up fast, and his healing hand lost grip, and the pistol flew from his feet. Jack had enough time to belch out a disbelieving, "For fuck's," when Beth opened fire from the hayloft. Caught in the open, the rescue rig technicians scattered fast. Chronon tech, just like the art killers at the university, but far less polished. Retrieving his weapon as the technician scrambled for cover, he noticed the second unit, a crew flanking the barn. They had put together what was happening and were looking to kick the barn from the rear, taking Beth by surprise. Jack batted off 3 shots, catching one man on the hip and causing the rest to rethink their plan. Jack fell back to the rusted planters as a swarm of shots sought him out, every round sparking off rather than penetrating. Time-locked earth and glass. The house was in terrible state, rolling slowly outward in pieces from the attic and second floor, stopping, winding back a little, only to roll forward again toward the inevitable. It was hard to focus. The light-headedness was back. Warping and shifting was costing him. He needed to regroup. 4 troopers clustered together behind a garage across from the house. Jack popped up and blasted out a stutter shield. The localized self-dividing moment popped to life around the 4 grunts, locking them to place. Ha! For about a second before the tech they wore to keep them mobile tore the shield apart. Crap! Jack zapped toward, closing the distance, and his abilities ended there. The ground seesawed. Jack forgot where he was. A trooper fired a blind spray around the corner of the garage. Slug zip-fanned above Jack's head. He flinched, translating his forward momentum into a knee skid across the dry white gravel. Righting himself as fast as he could, instinct had sent him scrambling, not for the blind side of the garage, but into the porch and into the front door of the dying house. Literally into the front door. In his panic, he didn't extend his chronon field to make the door active, and Jack rebounded off of it if it was concrete. The garage squad regrouped, crept along the south side wall. Beth kept them back by kicking up a wall of dirt in front of them with a 3-round burst. Jack got to his feet, eyeballed Beth. Framed by the upper hayloft door, she pointed to herself and then a crew behind the garage. Then she pointed to Jack and jerked a thumb toward the crew circling the barn. Jack gave a thumbs up, took a deep breath, and rabbited toward the barn, gun up and firing. From her elevated position, Beth opened fire with Gibson's carbine. Paul had crashed out the kitchen door, half blinded, onto the porch that curved around the north and east sides of the house. The occasional clap of gunfire made him jump, reflexively dropped the stutter shield. No bullets came. The threat was not to him. He sped from the shield, west into the forest-fringed back garden, jagged south to put the house between him and the firefight that was taking place in the front. His chronon field was already working to restore his vision, the lacerating caustic sting of his facial injuries fading to a livid modeling of his flesh. The gunfire at the front of the house escalated from a smattering of pops to a full-on multi-pointed fusillade. Jack was still alive. Paul wheeled, prepared to translate himself at speed around the southern side of the house to attack and apprehend his unskilled friend, to put an end to this madness, but stopped. What he saw made the strength flee from his legs. They existed. 5 of them, south of the house near the tree line, flickering, hulking, twitching. Then it was there in the morning light, dark and glittering and monstrous as though it had a right to be in the world that held Paul's happiest memories. That thing of... It moved. The ground belted him in the ass before his inner ear had a chance to realize he had toppled. The shifter with the shining palm came for him, unhurried like every button-pushing nightmare because it could. Because he couldn't get away. Because the universe itself knew Paul Serene was so much worse than dead. The thing raised its black, shifting hand to display the killing star at its palm. He froze. He was an animal trapped in the barrow of his own skull, with death at the entrance, chanting, the same syllable repetitious forever,
In time it penetrated and the sound became a word. Paul listened as his throat coughed up the word, "Go," over and over and over. His boots kicked against cold ground, carved runnels in the damp soil. His body twisted, fingers clawing at grass, and he was stumbling, chest grinding into the sod. Paul picked himself up and then he was running, straight for the woods. Jack let the tree trunk take his weight, slid to the ground, jacket biting into his armpits as he found the ground. The emptied and open pistol smoked, cradled loose in his slack fingers. 8 men dead, one of them kneeling beside him, face resting against the selfsame tree, lost to his wounds. Others were scattered about the area, frozen like this one at the moment they died. Some in mid-pirouette, some on their backs, one in mid-air. Misted blood hung like a spray of rubies. As the stutter slowly inched forward, every dead man engaged in the last dance of his life. Jack couldn't look at it. Throat raw and gasping, his head swimming and kill sick. Jack's brain tapped out. Beth called his name from the barn. He heard her clack in the fresh magazine. "Yeah," he called back. It took all he had. "Get up, Jack, right now." His tree was east of the barn. It was a perfectly pleasant place to sit on this sunny morning and watch the family home die. Will's desk had flown out of the shattered attic in a tongue of flame, smashing into the gravel drive. Flaming papers trailed in descent. It came to him then, the cause of Beth's alarm. The sound. It made its way across the garden, skipping schizophrenically through sliced up and compartmentalized sub-moments. It was the sound of a combustion engine, a big one. Jack had first heard it early in the morning outside Zed's, Beth's empty house in the dark. The grumbling blat of a Monarch Bearcat 300 horsepower diesel engine. Survival instinct got him upright, extending his chronon field to the dead trooper beside him, almost exhausted Jack to the point of blackout. But he managed to snare the dead man's rifle in 2 magazines before the stutter rebuked him. The toppling corpse refroze halfway to the ground. Even before it had cleared the trees, the Bearcat opened up, livid streams of fire, chunk, 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 chunking from something patient and furious the roof mounted. Large caliber rounds exploded like cherry bombs across the time-locked and invulnerable planking of the hayloft exterior. Jack shouted Beth's name, and that drew the needle-nosed attention of the double-gripped machine gun on the Bearcat. Without breaking fire, it swung the flashing stream toward Jack, who had no choice but to cut south toward the cover of the garage. No powers available. Boiling red lines of tracer fire stitching the air, rebounding in curling spirals from an environment that wouldn't budge. The Bearcat gunner tried to lead the fleeing figure, but couldn't rotate fast enough. Fire swept toward the rebounded off the garage, rounds ricocheting madly. Someone cried out, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Watch what you're fucking doing!" A risky 3-round burst from Beth got their attention. The Bearcat threw in the reverse, angling to net both Jack and Beth inside the firing arc. Jack caught a glimpse of the vehicle, noting the roof gunner protected on all sides by shoulder-high plating. Something else caught his attention. The bracing applied to the Bearcat's chassis. Segmented, it followed the X and Y axis of the vehicle. The design was similar to the rigs worn by the Peace Movement and Monarch Chronon troopers. That frame was keeping the Bearcat active inside the stutter. Jack shouldered his rifle and squeezed. Recoil sent the first shot high, sparking off the hood. The second shot hit one of the rig's polished segments square on. The panel took the hit, buckling, to no effect. The gunner opened up. A .50 caliber round struck the garage, fragmenting. A needle of molten lead slashed across Jack's forehead. He threw himself behind cover and fell back, clutching his face. Paul's hands were scraped from tumbles and from slapping bark to suddenly course correct. His path had been chosen thoughtlessly, and yet he soon realized he had always known where he was going. The mound was easy to miss, constructed as if it was with craft and guile. Built into a gentle sloped hill and masked with deadfall and shelter looked like part of the environment. More so now than when Jack and Paul had played there as kids. The forest had incorporated into itself. Drifts of pine needles had built up against it, while moss had prospered across the roof of mud and daub. It was a sign. No. He was panicking. They were everywhere. On the far side of the shelter, flush between 2 trees. There!
He ran for the tumble-down shelter, kicked away drift of soft deadfall, and clawed at the primitive hewn log door. He wrenched the door, strained it toward himself on fused hinges, rotting wood tearing along the frame, troweling up soft earth in which knots of earthworms writhed furiously and swung into foul-smelling twilight. The frail door clattered, warped with damp into the handmade frame. What light made it into here fell through the gaps in the rough planking. The floor was cold, moist earth. Eye pressed to a gap in the door, planking Paul saw two shifters, monstrosities like Dr. Kim's side by side. Not 50 feet away, fritzing, flashing, snapping, tortured as different versions of their form fought for dominance, staggering for him as though he were the cause of their pain. A rotten foam mattress decomposed on a raised earthen platform against the wall. Opposite this, a rudimentary wooden shelf had collapsed, just below the shelter's single long window. Some place to eat and watch the woods, maybe. A heavy wattle and daub cover swung down to close it off. Paul approached, peered through the slats, and whimpered. Control was slipping. 3 more shifters, arrayed unevenly between 30 and 50 feet distant. He was surrounded. As soon as people stop shooting, Jack told himself, I'm getting on a plane. Then he remembered that since stepping off his last flight, he had rocked onto the most wanted list. All because Paul wanted to do good. These people trust me, he said. I'm responsible for their livelihood, he said. They promised this massive, unlicensed, black hole-driven motherfucker is perfectly safe, he said. Beth risked a shot, the round snapping harmlessly past the Bearcat gunner's helmeted head, but keeping him low. Will knew the machine was defective. Said it was obviously defective. Miscalibration had gone by everyone on Paul's team. Was it sabotage? And if it was, who did the work? Who in Monarch had the expertise to tweak the time machine to cause this kind of damage and conceal it from the team of experts? Jack needed an elevated position if he was going to get a shot over the gunner's shielding. The garage was too low. If he went for the barn, that'd put both he and Beth exactly where those Monarch goons wanted them. Dead center. He needed another option. Jack felt the stutter change. Blinking blood out of his eyes, he saw every slow-motion thing stop. There was a different tide within the energy of his body now, and an opposite, subtle momentum to the energy of the world. The stutter was rewinding, slowly, and picking up speed. On the driveway, Will's desk reassembled. Flames fed their own reduction, seeming to fuel the house's slow reconstruction. Cinders turned to sheaves of paper. Disturbed gravel tidied up as the desk left the ground. Jack waved to Beth frantically. He pointed to the Bearcat, then to him and her, counted 3 on his fingers, then mimed firing. She nodded agreement. The desk was airborne, 2 feet off the ground and accelerating as the stutter gained momentum. The house began to suck the exploding ether back into itself, planks eagerly flying home. Window frames reassembled as they traveled back to their housings, preparing to self-socket. Jack swung out blasting as Beth steamed with fusillade overhead, the gunner responding by going full auto even as he ducked behind his shield. Jack kicked in his somewhat replenished reserve, then flashed across the gravel, twisted, landing butt first on the unstable desk. Beth scored a few close hits. The gunner yelped, and the machine gun stopped barking for one crucial moment. The desk angled steeply, quickly. Jack dropped the carbine to keep his grip on his ride, but the desk hadn't just fallen out of the front of the house. It had been blown out. It had come out flipping. As it rotated beneath him, Jack tucked his legs, grabbed the lip of the desk and forelegged now skyward, and scrambled to get his feet onto the underside. The Bearcat driver was screaming, "Shoot, you fuck! He's right there!" Beth exhausted her mag, which bought a few more seconds, and then the gunner was back at his station. Jack mantled onto the underside of the desk as he climbed to the eye level with the second floor, which was when a reverse-burning 1997 phone book shot up from beneath the desk and smashed Jack in the face. His head snapped back. His center of gravity held for a moment, but the desk kept rotating. A steel leg came down, jammed hard in his chest, doubling Jack forward as pain exploded below the collarbone. He threw his arms forward as the desk leg shoved him down. His fingertips strained for the desk's edge, but there was no reaching it. Instead, desperately, his fingers closed on the leg, like an impaled man might grab the spear that was killing him. The
The rotation was slow enough that he could grasp it with both hands, hanging free, hands over his head and feeling his grip slip. The desk was right way up, 2 floors above the gravel on his journey to the attic when the machine gun swung toward Jack. Hosing tracer fire aimed too high swept toward him like a killing whip. Shrapnel and wreckage flew toward him from below. Fuck it! Jack leaped off the desk and let the storm take him. A cardboard box full of novels slammed into his chest as a hose of tracer fire slashed downward. Angry fireworks pinging and whining among the storm of wreckage. The box abandoned Jack in its parabola, continuing on its way as Jack sailed free, punched around the legs and spine by trash and memorabilia before tumbling through and shattered wall hit the attic floor. He gasped, rolling aside as the desk scythed overhead and stopped. The stutter froze. The attic wall was a half-bloomed flower. Silence and a dimness. That dead thing reek of earth and rotted bedding. Someone laughed and Paul spun. 2 kids were in the shelter with him, standing on tiptoes, elbows resting on the ghost of the bench that had collapsed, watching the woods through the window that was closed all night. "No such thing as witches," the first kid said. His dark hair was fresh cut and parent approved. Even here his shirt was tucked into his trousers, his hair neatly combed. The boy next to him, fair-haired, was a different story. Thrift store khaki jacket with some big pockets, unwashed blue jeans, and that Riverport Raptors shirt he had worn to death. The voices of the thing outside used Paul's own brain as an amplifier. As one they howled for him, long and broken. "Who'd live in a place like this if they weren't a witch?" 10-year-old Jack asked Paul's younger self. "Look at this place." "The disenfranchised," the neatly dressed Paul responded. He had always repeated the big words his mother used, had tried so hard to sound much older than he was. "The what?" And they were gone. The howling ceased. Something strained at the door, yanked it, the thin shield of it wobbling. Paul's gun was up, the second door opened. A single round blasted through the head of the swelled woman who stood there. She turned, pushed the door wide to let in the air, and lowered her backpack onto the rotted mattress. The gunshot faded and fluxed, echoing, distorted through the time-locked woods. Her hands were weathered, and she hummed to herself, pulling earphones free. Unzipping her bag, she laid out 2 dented bean cans, a half loaf of bread, a cold cheeseburger. This was the Witch of the Woods, the figure Paul and Jack had mythologized, and then she was gone. Howls. Paul's hands slammed to his ears, hard, pistol-whipping himself in the process. Crying out, the cry turned to a scream. One breath, and the scream turned to a roar. "What? What do you want?" He slammed his face to the cracks in the door, wide eyes scanning. Oh God, they were 20 feet away. 5 of them. Paul looked at the loaded gun in his hand. Better he end it here than let them get him. Better he die by his own hand than become like Dr. Kim. Better he kill himself than to live to see the world turn into a colorless and unending purgatory, stalked by monsters and tortured by memory. Better, kinder that he ceased to be. The machine gun stopped firing. Jack figured it had to be reloading. He gasped like he'd landed fish. His chest was one massive bruise where the desk leg had punched him. He coughed wet and red. The roll across the attic floor had cost him. The snapped halves of rib or 2 scraped together, spearing him with the brightest pain. The jagged ends found each other as his body rapidly healed. The snapped rib halves kissed and fused seamlessly. His skin crawled at the fingers inside of this, feeling his chest unbruising. Back arched against it all, he saw the safe was back upstairs, 20 feet away from his head, one corner half submerged into the crumbling floor, ready to repeat its fall through the first floor hall to the kitchen below. Will's file was inside the open safe, the property deed, the key, the only real lead Jack had left inside this burning building. Body healed, but mind still flailing. He propelled himself forward and skidded across the hot floor of his unbruised chest, plunging his hand into the safe. The stutter broke. The safe dropped through the floorboards just as Jack snatched his arm free and propelled the shield. The room re-exploded, flame billowing out from the 4 corners,
papers flying from the folder out of the shield to be vaporized. "No!" He scrambled, saved a few, and jammed them into his jacket. Paul had prepared himself for moments of doubt, for trials such as this. 17 years preparing to overcome more than any man had ever endured in order to purchase a future for the human race. He had taken lives, manipulated nations and economies. The soul of the man he once had long been forfeit to the greater cause. It was his duty to undo what he had done. He took his emotions out of the equation, broke the situation down into what needed doing. He had to live. If he had not seen his plans to the end, then all of creation would stop. To live, he had to get away from what was outside the shelter. What was outside the shelter was... Blackness flooded the corners of his vision. He shook his head, reduced himself to the equation. A piece on the board. What was outside the shelter was a threat. The only way out was that door. If he waited, they would enter. If he allowed the enemy to dictate terms, he was doomed. Without a second's hesitation, Paul Serene kicked the door off the hinges and came out shooting. It was the only option he had left. The Monarch teams were coming to terms with the playfield suddenly changing. The stutter juddered, rewound further. Behind her, as Beth reloaded, Gibson's hand rewound far enough to unslap the deactivation plates on his rescue rig. As she swung up to take the opportunity shot at one of the team leaders, Gibson locked her from behind, combat knife pressed to her neck. "Alrighty, pumpkin butter, drop it." Beth let her rifle hit the boards. "See, Wilder, this is why you didn't make the cut. Stupid." His breath was shot in her ear. "And now you go from being a soldier to being something I do in my spare time." At that moment, the second technician team swept into the rear of the barn as the Bearcat gunner opened up on the hayloft in the front. Heavy-hitting tracer rounds curled the spat ricocheting off the time-lock surfaces, sending high-velocity rebounds spraying down onto the barn floor at a pinball out of space, tearing men to shreds. Gibson yelled and leaped sideways, freeing Beth to snatch her stolen rifle and roll away from him. She wheeled, dropped to one knee, and threw the sights up level with Gibson. Gibson threw himself off the edge into the barn below. The Bearcat was ripping into the hayloft. From the attic inside the house, Jack could see Beth hunkering down, making herself as small as possible, but it was only a matter of time before the ricochet found her. He had no weapon, and the Bearcat was armored. He had a stupid idea, so he ran with it. He ran at the brown open attic wall, folded into the moment, and threw himself out, aiming for the Bearcat. The warp negated the impact, and Jack landed boots first onto the hood. The driver had time to shout a warning before Jack clamped both hands onto one section of the Chronon mobility lattice that sheathed the vehicle and channeled everything he had into it. Chronon energy flowed through him to the vehicle's battery. Keeping his head under the roof gun, Jack poured everything he had into the Bearcat's mobility rig. Somewhere inside the cabin, things caught fire. Jack let go, scrambled over the windshield, grabbing the barrel of the weapon for leverage. The Chronon battery erupted. Then the fuel tank kicked off. As Jack leaped clear, the Bearcat exploded, the rear of the vehicle leaping skyward. Everything went black. Paul came out shooting, keep the faces of those he's loved. Sophia, the Jack he remembered, his own mother, at the forefront of his mind. These talismans would keep the darkness, the fear, and horror at bay. The first shot took the nearest shifter in the head. Paul caught a glimpse of a human face beneath the distortion. The spray of blood, but it made no difference. In less than a second, the creature had phased through half a dozen versions of itself, all of them alive and furious. He fired again and again, each death rendered meaningless by each shifter's infinite litany of potential selves. There were not enough bullets in the world to kill even one of them. They did not seem to mind his attempted murder. The assembled shifters didn't react. They didn't move. Paul jagged right and altered course, aiming for the house just beyond the thinning tree line ahead. They did not pursue, but he knew they would not let him go. Most of the barn team was dead. Those who survived were getting their shit together. Beth saw Gibson book it out the back of the barn, headed for the house. She presumed he'd looking for Serene, looking to confirm for his boss, Hatch, that Paul was either alive or dead. Her big problem was that Gibson had positively ID'd her. Once the stutter broke, comms would be working again, and Gibson would immediately blow her cover. She should have killed him. She knew that. But she met his daughter. She was a sweet kid, and she loved her dad. She deserved a family. The thought flashed, who are we really talking about here, Beth? She had to kill him. Grabbing the lower lip of the hayloft door, she bounced out, braked her boots against the outside wall, and dropped to the ground, glancing only once at the frozen, semi-exploded bearcat in front of her. Jack, static, unconscious, and in mid-air at the top of the flame plume. Several men behind the garage were in the same state. The rest were falling back toward the woods. "I'll be right back," she promised Jack, and ran for the house. She came in through the front door, pushing past falling and burning debris suspended in space. That's how Gibson got the drop on her, leaping at her through the chaos to her left with the knife in his hand. Beth feigned left, swung the rifle right, and both combatants missed each other. Gibson landed low, pivoted, and leaped again before Beth could swing her rifle around. The stutter vibrated, the death thunder of a house a blast of deafening stop-start sound. Beth shielded her head. Gibson didn't hesitate. She got close, slashed as a chunk of burning plaster dropped hard on the back of his head. The blade was off target, but still opened a small cut in her bicep. Beth danced out of the way. The stutter shuddered again, harder. She had to save Jack before the bearcat exploded properly, killing him.
"Consultant, are you here, sir?"
"You had a family, Gibson," she said. "Instead, you wanted this." Gibson spun, jabbed. Beth avoided the attack easily. Closed in. "It's over." A rabbit punch to the jaw sent him staggering behind, the back of his leg connecting with the couch. With one move, she slapped both hip plates, locking him solid. The ceiling overhead bulged under the weight of its own burning collapse. In about 4 relative seconds, the room would be an inferno. Beth got the hell out of there, cleared the distance between the stoop and the bearcat. The truck was balancing on its front left tire. The rear underside of the vehicle cracked open and exploding. Jack had been hit by the blast wave as he leaped off, knocking him out and deactivating his powers, leaving him frozen. Beth managed to get a toehold near the windshield, then leaped for Jack's ankle. Grabbing it, she pulled herself up onto the angled roof of the vehicle, hanging onto Jack the whole while. Hoping this was going to work, she double-jumped her hands and channeled her rescue rig's charge into him. The bars on her belt ticked off, one by one, and... Jack reanimated, all dead weight, and crashed onto her. They tumbled back over the hood and hit the dirt hard. Beth rolled over, got herself upright. The rig had a single bar left out of 5. Jack lay insensible on the ground, barely conscious. She grabbed his jacket with both hands, dragging him toward the cover over the barn. The stutter pulsed, and the house exploding outward a fraction. Double time, before retracting, then rolling out again in excruciating slow motion. She needed to get them both behind the barn before the house gas mains went up, but Jack was a lot of dead weight. She dropped him, then got around front and hauled him upright. You... Jack managed to take in enough to make an assessment. You saved me? Not yet, she said, pulling him off the ground. Come on, Tribble, get up or we're dead. Jack focused. He saw the house suck itself back in and tremble. He felt the same motion in his own bloodstream, the motion that told him the stutter was about to break. That was all he needed. On his feet now and stumbling, they cleared the barn and garage and kept sprinting, straight through the sycamores. Once they got close to the fence line, Jack grabbed her arm. Wait! Jack had stopped and looked back at the house. The facade of the building continued to roll outward, then stopped, juddered, then all at once drew itself right back in one disconcerting move. Exploded wood and shattered windows, rewound perfectly, peacefully, and completely, closing behind a final belch of spark and flame, sealed, leaving the Joyce family home intact, the place where he had grown up, whole and complete, for the last time. The stutter broke. The house erupted upward and outward as the brakes released and causality leaped forward. The shockwave knocked Jack and Beth to the ground, the detonation of either C4 and the gas mines blasting the buildings to kindling that rained down around them. The barn had taken a fatal blow, and, after a moment, It creaked and collapsed away from them. Sycamores burned. It was all gone. The other shifters moved aside, flashing to new locations throughout the woods, allowing Shining Palm to come forward, to close in, to claim the man it had been stalking for so long. Paul stared into the oncoming glare of something worse than death, his legs and mind betraying him instantly, clinging to those last moments of himness, of being Paul. These were his last breaths, his last thoughts. All he was, all he had built, was about to be turned on himself, corrupted and inverted and perverted. His was an eternity of chaos and loss. An eternity. It flashed to 40 feet closer, to 20. Paul couldn't move. He couldn't look. He could feel it, radiating mere feet from him now. It roared, demanding to be seen. He couldn't open his eyes. His teeth crushed against each other, strangled a scream. The ground shuddered with a terrible roar as Joyce's house detonated. Birds shrieked to life, flying free from the forest canopy. Paul felt the wave of heat push through the trees wash across his face. Chronon flow normal. Causality returned. The stutter broke. The stutter broke, and he was alone. Alive. Weakly, gratefully, Paul Serene collapsed onto the wet earth and wept.